It was just before midnight in DeWitt, Texas, when Pastor Matt Baker walked into his home after a long day of church duties. The house was quiet, too quiet. As he stepped into the bedroom, his heart stopped. His wife, Carrie, was lying motionless on the bed. Her lips were blue, her hands ice cold. He rushed to her side, shaking her, calling her name, but there was no response. Panic surged through him as he fumbled for his phone, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. "My wife, she's not breathing." The dispatcher urged him to start CPR, but deep down, he knew it was too late. Minutes later, paramedics arrived, working frantically, but there was nothing they could do. Carrie Baker was gone. The police ruled it a suicide almost instantly. A note on the nightstand sealed their conclusion, but Matt refused to believe it. Something didn't add up. The woman he loved, the mother of his children, the woman who had survived unthinkable grief, would she really take her own life? Or was there something far more sinister at play? The deeper he looked, the darker the truth became. In the quiet suburb of San Bernardino, where life seemingly flowed like the gentle breeze through the palm trees, darkness lingered beneath the surface. Isaac Albert Perez, a husband and father, felt the weight of betrayal as he vividly recalled the moments leading up to that fateful night. It had been a roller coaster of emotion for him, weaving through anger, hurt, and an overwhelming sense of helplessness. As the sun set that evening, he knew he had reached a breaking point. It was a little after midnight on January 26, 2025, when Isaac decided to confront his wife, Asia Gersey. Throughout their marriage, Asia had been the light in his life, a radiant spirit who filled their home with laughter and love. He was proud of the family they had built together, especially their 2 young children, who adored their mother. However, everything had changed when Isaac discovered that Asia was having an affair with another man, Charles Dark. The revelation shattered him, leaving him feeling betrayed and rejected. That night, as he parked his car at Paris Hill Park, Isaac's mind raced. The confrontation he had dreamt of was no longer just a fantasy. It was a cold reality. He felt adrenaline coursing through his veins as he spotted Asia's car. The anger inside him simmered, radiating outward in waves. He had accepted the heartbreak, but he couldn't shake the visceral rage that bubbled just below the surface. He confronted Asia and Charles, demanding answers regarding their betrayal. The sight of them together sent a wave of despair washing over him. How could she do this to their family? As tension thickened in the air, the realization hit him like a brick wall. He was losing her. Asia, visibly shaken, tried to reason with him, but it only fueled his anger further. The couple attempted to drive away, and in that moment of panic, a primal urge took over Isaac. He revved his engine and took off after them, determined to confront the depth of their betrayal. His heart raced, each beat pounding with an uncontrollable mix of anguish and vengeance. The chase began, a frantic race fueled by emotions he could hardly comprehend. With every turn they took, Isaac followed closely, his mind clouded by rage. The streets of San Bernardino blurred around him. It was as if the world had faded away, leaving only him and the couple in that small moment. He couldn't fathom why they thought they could escape him. His thoughts spiraled out of control, convincing him that he was doing this for his family, for his children. How could Asia choose another man over her husband? As they approached a limited visibility area, Isaac's car collided with theirs. The force sent them off the road, through a chain-link fence, and into a flood control channel. Time slowed as he realized what had happened, moments blurring into a cacophony of screams and metal crunching against metal, punctuated by the sickening sound of their impact. The world around him shifted, his focus narrowing to the aftermath. In his mind, he had reached a desperate conclusion without realizing the devastating consequences of his actions. Panic flooded through him as he crashed to a stop, his heart racing in horror at what had just transpired. He emerged from his car to assess the damage, yet the chaos before him left him paralyzed. The reality began to dawn on him. Asia and Charles lay lifeless in the wreckage. The weight of that truth descended upon him like a heavy fog, suffocating and inescapable. With sirens blaring in the distance, he stood frozen, confronted by what he had done. When law enforcement arrived, they found him still at the scene, hollow and dismantled. Officers pulled him aside, their glances heavy with the knowledge of mortality amid the wreckage. He was taken into custody as the realization of his actions began to sink in. The once ordinary man was charged with 2 counts of murder, but the term felt inadequate to capture the horror of the moment. Days passed, but the weight of the crash loomed large over Isaac's existence. News of the tragedy spread like wildfire, becoming a spectacle for neighbors and friends who had once embraced him and Asia as the perfect couple. Social media buzzed with speculation. Their love had blossomed quickly. The two had met in May and tied the knot by August, fully aware of their deep emotional connection. In the time they spent together, their family grew. Their daughters, Cody and Cassidy, became the center of their universe. Life had its ups and downs, with the most harrowing moments stemming from their precious Cassidy's battle with a brain tumor shortly after her first birthday. Matt remembered the fear he felt during those dark days spent in the pediatric ICU, the looming shadow of uncertainty gripping them. Yet through it all, Carrie had remained strong, gaining strength through her faith and maternal instinct. They had fought tooth and nail for Cassidy's recovery, enduring the trials of chemotherapy and sleepless nights. Finally, their prayers were answered when they brought Cassidy home from the hospital. That was one of the happiest days of their lives, a feeling he couldn't quite comprehend anymore in haunting retrospect. But nightmares soon returned. Matt had assumed everything would improve with time, yet darkness loomed. Tragically, Cassidy's life was cut short when Matt discovered his daughter lifeless in her crib. That crushing moment broke both of them, pulling the couple apart as they tried to navigate differing grief. Matt struggled to hold it together, while Carrie was decidedly unable to move forward. All she could do was pour her heart and soul into journals filled with sorrow and grief. She sought therapy and counsel, desperately seeking a foothold in the dark abyss where she found herself trapped. Through weeks of heartache, Carrie searched for solace and healing. With a yearning to love again, she found hope in the most unexpected way when she learned she was pregnant again. When the news broke, there was joy in the Baker household, mixed with that undercurrent of fear. Would this baby be taken from them too? The thought that they might lose another child hung heavy in the air, the unspoken tension palpable in every room of the house. Matt watched her struggle to retain her faith as she battled her fears. Carrie's strength was admirable, yet her sleepless nights often culminated in despair. It was so unlike the woman he had first fallen in love with, a bubbly spirit engaging with the world. She carried herself differently now, weighed down by a bleak shadow of loss and trepidation. Time slipped by, but the challenge of traversing their grief remained. The family did their best to cling to happiness, but the threads of their lives felt fragile, frayed with sadness that threatened to tear them apart. Just about 7 years after Cassidy's untimely death, tragedy struck again as Matt found his wife lifeless on their bedroom floor. As he stood there, fighting the rising tide of horror, uncertainty coursed through him. He clutched his phone tightly, fingers trembling as he called for help. "What's your emergency?" the operator asked. Matt's voice cracked, nearly breaking as he struggled to convey the frenzy unfolding before him. His heart raced. Memories of happier times replayed in his mind, a stark contrast to the heartbreaking scene before him. The paramedics arrived, their urgent footsteps echoing in the stillness. But despite their efforts, the body of the woman who had brought him so much joy lay cold and motionless. The devastation around him felt insurmountable, an unbearable weight pressing down on him as he pleaded for answers. The nagging suspicion of foul play tinged his reality as questions hung thick in the air like dense fog. Everything felt wrong. Nothing about this tragedy made sense. Months passed into years where the investigation perpetually stalled, leaving Matt grappling with a mix of grief, confusion, and anger. He couldn't shake the idea that Carrie had been robbed of her life, that the vibrant spirit who had filled their home with laughter couldn't possibly have taken her own life. Within him, a fire sparked, a desire to honor Carrie's memory, to find clarity for years of unanswered questions. The truth will rise, he told his supportive circle, the women who had stood by him since the beginning. They formed a collective force, refusing to accept the conclusion that Carrie had died by suicide. Together, they connected with other individuals touched by loss, looking for common threads and shared stories of grief. When the verdict was finally delivered, Isaac was ready. It wasn't about escaping the consequences, it was about seeking forgiveness, both for himself and from those who had been affected by his actions. The jury deliberated, and though they found him guilty, he felt a strange sense of peace. They had acknowledged the tragedy of that night, a night that irrevocably impacted so many lives. As he returned to his cell, Isaac reflected on the transformation within him. While there was no way to erase the past, he understood that he had the opportunity to rebuild his life, perception, and his children's future. Through the ashes of regret, he yearned to create something meaningful, something that would honor the memory of Asia and the life they shared. At the moment of confinement, he realized that growth stems from the most painful experiences. He accepted that the pain he endured would serve as a constant guide, reminding him of the fragile nature of life and love. Determined to share his story and help others navigate their emotions before reaching a breaking point, he looked toward the future with cautious optimism. Though the road ahead would be long and treacherous, Isaac began to understand that healing starts with self-realization. His story, birthed from anguish, could serve as a cautionary tale of the power of love and the dangers of allowing hatred to take the reins. In embracing his humanity, even after facing the deepest despair, Isaac hoped to reclaim not just his life, but the legacy left behind by a love that once bloomed. He had learned the hardest truth, that sometimes love can morph into something unrecognizable, propelling individuals toward tragedy when left unchecked. As he took another breath, he silently vowed to honor both the love and loss that defined his circumstances, emerging from the darkness as a messenger of change, reminding him of the fragile nature of life and love. Determined to share his story and help others navigate their emotions before reaching a breaking point, he looked toward the future with cautious optimism. Though the road ahead would be long and treacherous, Isaac began to understand that healing starts with self-realization. His story, birthed from anguish, could serve as a cautionary tale of the power of love and the dangers of allowing hatred to take the reins. In embracing his humanity, even after facing the deepest despair, Isaac hoped to reclaim not just his life, but the legacy left behind by a love that once bloomed. He had learned the hardest truth, that sometimes love can morph into something unrecognizable, propelling individuals toward tragedy when left unchecked. As he took another breath, he silently vowed to honor both the love and loss that defined his circumstances, emerging from